Welcome to Gravity Ohio's Up Close and Personal series here at Dan Lewis King's. My name is Eric Stiegel. I'm the President and Executive Director of Gravity Ohio. The mission of Gravity Ohio is to foster mutual respect among all peoples through shared cultural and artistic experiences. We fulfill that mission through our three pillars: culinary incubation, the arts, and our 560 speaker series, which you are all attending right now. A word about each: culinary incubation. We work with local high school culinary students, Madison, Pioneer, and Mansfield City, to afford them the opportunity to experience real-time food service. Through partnership with North Central State College, these students have the opportunity to earn college credit, college scholarships, and pursue an associate's degree at the collegiate level. The arts, our second pillar. We provide forums to share artistic creation and foster artistic creation through collaboration among all peoples and mediums. An example, and some of you in the audience were here this weekend for our Gershwin and Porter review that our lovely Marianne Cooper put on. It was one of those artistic experiences to hear music that you may not have heard before. The third is shared experiences like this one, so our Up Close and Personal series that we're about to have and kick off this evening. It may be music, it may be a dramatic reading, an interview, a debate, a panel discussion that is done in an intimate setting that is paired with wonderful food. Guests will come beyond Mansfield and beyond the Mansfield area to share their experiences with those who live and work in this area. Tonight, Jay Fox will interview Leon Bibb about his 50-year-plus career in journalism. Both Fox and Bibb are from Shaker Heights, and at a chance meeting at an automotive service station in 1984, Leon Bibb actually suggested that Fox look into journalism as a career path. He did, and he pursued it, and the rest is history. Leon Bibb began his Cleveland TV career at WKYZ TV3 in Cleveland, which was an NBC affiliate, in 1979. He worked there for 16 years as a news anchor before moving to WEWS TV5, where he served as a primetime anchor for 22 years. In retirement, he has returned to WKYC TV3 and hosts weekly public affair programming and provides astute commentary for the newscast. Please welcome Jay Fox and Mr. Leon Bibb.
I think you got to get him mic'd up. Where do you want this on him? I think you know how to use that better than I do.
I'll find a place to put it.
So,
How's that?
we got to get you a microphone too. There you go.
Thank you, Jay. Good
Remember
to
the
be
name of
here.
the gas station?
Gulf. It was a Gulf gas station at the corner of Chagrin and Northfield and Warrensville Center Road.
Back when it was 5 ways.
Exactly.
Right.
5 points, yeah.
So Warrensville Center Gulf, we're sitting there, and you're waiting for your car to be fixed, and I'm waiting for my car to be fixed, and you said, "Young man?" I said, "Yes, Mr. Bibb." He says, "Oh, you know who I am?" I said, "I watch you every night." He says, are you from around here?" I said, "I live in Shaker Heights." He says to me, "Where do you go to school? Shaker?" I said, "No, sir, I go to Hawken." "Oh, fine school, fine school." He says, "What do you do?" I said, "Well, I play soccer, debate." He says, "You ever thought about journalism? Shame on you for what you did to me."
It kind of grabs you and it doesn't let you go. I'm retired, but still showing up. I've got a couple of things to do at Channel 3 tomorrow afternoon when I get in there.
Who's this handsome guy?
I don't know. I put on a nice suit and had a photographer grab a shot of us down at Playhouse Square.
That is my favorite picture of you. Well, a friend of yours dropped by to say hello, but he couldn't be here in person.
Leon, congratulations on 50 years in broadcasting. You know, it seems like just yesterday, the two of us were riding the RTA from Shaker Heights to downtown Cleveland during our days together at WKYC. Of course, you were jumping the turnstile and then you know, kind of going through some of the change machines, but that's another story. I wish you all the best today and another 50 years of storytelling, and that, my friend, puts you on a Smucker's jar. Wow!
If only Willard Scott
Yeah.
would be here for that moment.
But it's a true story. It's a true story. We rode the rapid transit together, and Al and I both lived in Shaker Heights. I'm still Marguerite. My wife Marguerite's here with me tonight, by the way. We're still in Shaker Heights, and Al and I would ride the 3:30. For the 3:30 shift, we'd go in around 2:30 in the afternoon. We'd ride the rapid transit together. It goes right to downtown Cleveland, right to Public Square, and then we'd walk to the television station from there. And we'd catch the midnight rapid transit after the 11 o'clock news. We would run like crazy to catch the last rapid transit to Shaker Heights. And the same people would be on who had come in earlier. We were both working the 8-hour shift. So, and I played straight man to Al Roker. He did jokes on the rapid transit. He did jokes on the rapid transit, and I played straight man. I'd set him up, and he'd spike him over the net.
Every time.
Yeah,
So, do you recognize that picture?
a long time ago.
3 News.
Action 3 News, when we started in late 1979 on into the 1980s, and I started as the weekend anchor, and eventually got promoted to Monday through Friday, 6 o'clock and 11 o'clock.
So you were the first African-American anchor of a local television newscast in the state of Ohio.
Yeah, prime time show. That meant Monday through Friday, 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock, or 11 o'clock. And I started that in Columbus.
Yes.
In 1977, I think it was.
What did that mean to you at the time? How significant was that for you?
I felt like Jackie Robinson. I wanted to do good, but I knew that I had to hit the ball, run the bases, slide into the bases, do all the things that Jackie did. I had to do that in the television news business and get along with everybody.
Did you face any resistance at WCMH?
On occasion, I'd get a letter. But generally speaking, most people accepted what I was doing because of maybe it was the attitude I brought to it. I don't know. I will tell you, Jay, that when I started television in 1971 in Toledo, Ohio, right out of college.
Channel 11, right?
Channel 11, WTOL, the CBS station. When I started there, I was the 4th black person in the entire building in any capacity. I was the 4th. So it was we were opening up some doors. Doors were opening up, and I had a 6th grade teacher who told me what I told you at the Gulf station. My 6th grade teacher said, "You got away with words, young man. You ought to be a journalist. You ought to go in journalism." And that's when I got bitten by the bug. That day, I can take you to within 5 feet of where we were standing that graduation day from the 6th grade at the Miles Standish Elementary School in Cleveland, to where Mr. Robert Taylor put his hands on my shoulders and said, "You have a talent, and you ought to work with that talent." And I do think that people come along in our lives to affect our lives. So Robert Taylor affected my life, and you say I affected your life. In many ways, Robert Taylor affected your life.
I had you. I had Dorothy Foldheim, who was my grandmother's best friend.
Oh.
And of course, if I ever came to her house to visit, if Dorothy was there, she would put me through paces about what I learned.
Oh, yeah.
And she was very stern. "Young man, what did you learn today?" And I'd have to go through all of that.
She was the grand dame of the grand dame, I suppose I should say it.
So, in your career, you've had the opportunity to cover many stories. And we're going to take a look at some of those big stories over the 5 decades that you've served. And probably one of the most interesting stories is your interview with James Earl Ray, who was convicted of assassinating Martin Luther King and confessed to the crime only to recant it. And it's a fascinating story.
It was, in fact, I had, you may not know that I photographed Martin Luther King when he came to Cleveland in 1965. I was interning at the Cleveland Call-and-Post weekly newspaper, and I photographed Dr. King that summer. I was working part-time in between college semesters. So I was with Dr. King, although I didn't know him or anything like that. And then years later, I'm with James Earl Ray, the man who killed Dr. King. And we interviewed James Earl Ray down in Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary down in Tennessee. And it was quite there was a well-known, an infamous pornographer by the name of Larry Flint out of Columbus. Everybody says, oh yeah. Larry lived in Columbus. I was working in television in Columbus. His magazine came out of Columbus, and he came to me one day at the TV station and says, Leon, how'd you like to interview James Earl Ray? I can get you in because I'm trying to get him a new trial. And he didn't think that Ray was guilty, although Ray had pleaded guilty to killing Dr. King. So I said, yeah, and the TV station said, yeah, you're going down there and do a profile on these two men, James Earl Ray and Larry Flint. It's a local story because Larry lived in Columbus, and I'm working for the NBC in Columbus. So we get down and interview James Earl Ray. He knows we're coming. We're set up in a little room that they let us use inside the prison. James Earl Ray comes in under two corrections officers are escorting him. He walks in, Jay, and he looks at me and he says, are you the man who's interviewing me? I says, yes, I am. He says, how you doing? I'm James Earl Ray.
Did you recoil?
No, I didn't recoil. I was taken aback. I hadn't planned on all of that. So when a man extends his hand, what do? You shake his hand. He does not have to do the interview. He certainly doesn't have to do it. So I shake his hand. So when I shake his hand, what do I say? I don't say, well, nice to meet you, or how things going, or anything like that. He's in prison. I just say, okay, yeah, I'm Leon Bibb. I'm from Columbus. And why don't you have a seat right here, and we'll put a microphone on you. And that's how we did the interview. And we talked about the MLK assassination, which he denied, although he confessed to doing it to stay out of the death house. But he denied doing it to me, and he lied. I mean, I could tell he was lying through the whole interview. But I guess I'm the only local television news reporter to have interviewed the man who killed Martin Luther King. And I had been with Martin Luther King. I've been with Coretta Scott King, had dinner with her, sat shoulder to shoulder with her at a program where I introduced her. I've interviewed their son, Martin Luther King III, and I've interviewed a lot of the lieutenants who were with Dr. King during the civil rights movement. So I was kind of all the way around that event. But
how soon after that interview did you wash your hands?
I was so interested in getting the interview. We sat down and we talked, and then I did a profile of Larry Flint of Hustler magazine and of Columbus, Ohio, and we put those two together for a half-hour special. But something happened along the way to preparing that half-hour special, which was going to air a month later after we did the interview. Larry Flint gets shot while he's in Georgia. 2 weeks before, I'm with him in Tennessee. We're having lunch together. We're going through the cafeteria line together, and we're riding in his limousine, and I'm photographing him, and all of that's going on at the same time. And then when he got shot, and in an assassination attempt or murder attempt, we had to move the story up very quickly because he was hot news again. So we had to move it up very quickly, and I pulled this thing together, this half-hour special together, in the first 2 weeks right after we did James Earl Ray.
And that was the shooting that put him in the wheelchair for the rest of his life, correct?
For the wheelchair, the rest of his life. Some years later, I ran into Larry when he was in Cleveland. He showed up at at the television station to do an interview with somebody. I pulled up, and this would have been in the 1990s, maybe the late 90s. I was over at Channel 5 in those days, and he pulled up in a limousine and got out, and somebody said, you know, Larry Flint's leaving. He was just here. And I ran out to him, and I went out, and he sees me coming toward the car, and he rolls down the window. He says, Leon, how are you? You remember you, me, and James Earl Ray. That's my Larry Flint story.
The boy mayor. Do you remember that?
I remember that. When he was elected, I was working in Columbus at the time I think he was elected in 77, I believe. I was still in Columbus, and Dennis Kucinich was 34 years old, youngest, I think he's still the youngest mayor ever in the city of Cleveland. And it didn't go well for Mayor Dennis Kucinich in Cleveland. It was a lot of things just didn't get started right, but I remember quite well.
But at least his hair didn't catch on fire like Ralph Perk.
Not like Ralph Perk. I've seen the video of that, where the former mayor, Ralph Perk's hair caught on fire while he was cutting something with an acetylene torch, and sparks jumped up, caught his hair on fire. They had cameras running at the same time. So.
Those of us who lived in Ohio during 77, 78, and 79 will remember some of these images, and keep in mind, if the video decides to play, that this was 70s TV, so it's definitely not high definition, if you will. But when you think back to these blizzards, how did it impact your ability to get to work to deliver the news?
I almost got divorced from Marguerite when the blizzard of 1978 hit. She probably doesn't remember, but I remember well. The blizzard hit all over Northeast Ohio, all over the state of Ohio, all over this part of the country. Those of you with some gray hair around the temples probably remember this. And I said, I've got to get into the TV station. I've got to get in early, although I'm not scheduled for another 3 or 4 hours to get in there. I've got to go now, because if I don't go now, I'll get snowed out and I won't be able to get in. And she says, you're going to leave me? You're going to leave me? We had a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old daughter. We had an 8-year-old daughter, and we had a 1-year-old daughter. 2 daughters, and Marguerite. And she's got the little one on, she's holding, and the other one is holding onto her skirt. And I said, Marguerite, I've got to go, and I don't know when I'm coming back. And she says, you're going to leave me? And I didn't know what to say. I just said, God be with you. God be with you. And I left. I went to work, and I didn't come home for 3 days. I didn't, and I covered the blizzard of 78. I went out with the Ohio National Guard, and we covered that blizzard as well as we could. And I do remember I was at Channel 4, the NBC station. The other 2 stations in town, Channel 6, Channel 10, got knocked off the air. So we were the only game in town. If you wanted television, it was just Channel 4. This is before cable as we know it, or streaming and all of that. So I actually welcomed, because I'm reporting from the field, I actually welcomed people. Normally you watch Channel 10 or Channel 6, they are knocked off the air, and they're working to get their transmitters back up and running. But until then, you're with us. We welcome you to Channel 4. I remember that. And we want some
That will never
awards.
happen today. Right?
No, it probably would not
Could you
happen.
imagine Mix 106 welcoming Y105? Probably not.
We welcome their audience, but we were the only thing in town, the only thing going in town.
So you switched chairs with Doug Adair. He went down to Columbus, and you came up to Cleveland.
Yeah, but we did work together for a while in Cleveland. I came and I was doing weekends, and Doug Adair and Mona Scott were doing Monday through Friday, 6 and 11. Mona and I had worked together in Columbus before she came back to Cleveland, before she came to Cleveland.
Right. Mm-hmm. So in 1980, in Cleveland, Ohio, was a very famous presidential debate. Hopefully we'll get this. Here we go.
Next Tuesday, all of the days hold. We'll stand there in the polling place and make ladies. I think when you make that decision, it might be well if you would ask yourself, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Is it easier for you to go and buy things in the stores than it was 4 years ago? Is there more or less unemployment in the country than there was 4 years ago? Is America as respected throughout the world as it was? Do you feel that our security is as safe, that we're as strong as we were 4 years ago? And if you answer all of those questions, yes, why then I think your choice is very obvious as to who you would vote for. If you don't agree, if you don't think that this course that we've been on for the last 4 years is what you would like to see us follow for the next 4, then I would suggest another choice that you have.
So when you see that, you think about the election of 1980, which is, in the history of this country, a major turning point in our political spectrum. What does that harken back for you?
That is one of the, if that's the debate, if that is the actual debate with Jimmy Carter running for re-election, who, by the way, turned 99 years old, I think, yesterday. God bless him. And then Rosalind, he and Rosalind are 90-something. I think they've been married something like 75 years or something like that. But the debate was in downtown Cleveland. It was at Public Hall in downtown Cleveland. And of course, I had a piece of that. Everybody had a piece of that. And that was perhaps a major turning point for Republican Reagan to defeat the incumbent Jimmy Carter in 1980. And that man there, Ronald Reagan, was wonderful in the way he could deliver lines. I think acting probably had a lot to do with it. I remember he says, I worked with the late Dick Fegler. You might remember Dick Fegler. He was a commentator. I had worked for the newspaper, worked for the Cleveland Press, and later the Plain Dealer. He was a commentator at Channel 3, and then later at Channel 5. We were very close. He's a few years older than I was, but we were very close. And he and I were watching Reagan's speech one day, and Reagan said something like, talking about these great military men, and Reagan said, "Where do we get such men? Where do we get such men?" Dick Fegler and I looked at each other and says, "We get them from the movie The Bridges at Toko-Ri," because that was the line that Frederick March made at the end of the film. Where do we get such men? So I think about that, but he won and did 2 terms. I covered the campaign and covered Jimmy Carter when he came to Cleveland and spoke out in Shaker Heights, out on South Park Boulevard, I think it was. I covered that, so it was a kick for me to cover presidents like that.
Later in the decade, this particular event happened.
It was a bitter cold but sparkling clear morning at Cape Canaveral. Here at the last seconds of the countdown.
3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
All the communications between the shuttle and mission control indicated everything was going fine. There was a sense of relief that the much delayed flight was finally underway.
Engines at 65%, 3 engines running normally, 3 good fuel cells, 3 good APUs. Engines throttling up, 3 engines now at 104%. Challenger, go and throttle up. Challenger, go and throttle up.
It happened just over 1 minute into flight.
1 minute 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical miles. Downrange distance 7 nautical miles.
From mission control, silence. Then the bland, chilling report.
We have a report from the flight dynamics officer that the vehicle has exploded. Flight director confirms that. We are looking at checking with the recovery forces to see what can be done at this point.
Slow motion. A search effort couldn't begin for some 15 minutes after this. Debris, they said, just kept raining from the sky. The head of the space shuttle program had no explanations, just sorrow at the tragedy.
At 11:40 a.m. this morning.
And I'm going to pause this there. You're in the newsroom. Reporters are gathering, watching this because it's covered on all networks.
Yeah.
This happens on live television. What happens next in the newsroom when something like this occurs?
Something like that happens, well, we all wonder, where do we go? What do we do next? Certainly somebody goes out to NASA Glenn in suburban Cleveland, out by Hopkins Airport. Certainly, probably several somebodies go out there with several cameras go out there to get their viewpoint. Of course, we know what the viewpoint is, but they probably aren't going to say anything, but we need to go anyway. I go into my files, my own personal files, well, the TV station files at that time, because I have an interview with Judy Resnick. Judy Resnick, who was blown up on this. She was an astronaut from Akron. And 2 years before, I had gone to the Johnson Space Center to interview Judy Resnick about one day going to flight. And there it is right there. And I have since been with her father, had dinner with her father. In fact, over the years, we got to be acquaintances, I suppose. But that's where you go. So you go back and you see what you've done in the past. With Judy Resnick, I'd interviewed Judy and spent the day in Houston, Texas with her, reporting on this Ohio woman from Akron who wanted to be an astronaut and was in training for an astronaut. And she says, one day I'm going to go up on shuttle. One day, maybe a couple of years ago, I'll get my shot. And that was her time.
The Stokes name is synonymous with Cleveland. Carl Stokes was the first African-American mayor of the city. Lou Stokes was a representative, served in Congress for years and years. Michael White was elected in 1989. There were obvious comparisons drawn. Mm-hmm. You interviewed Michael White. What was your take on him?
I'd interviewed Carl Stokes as well, but not as mayor. I will say before I get to Mike, I voted for Carl and I voted absentee from Vietnam. I was a soldier in Vietnam, caught up in the Vietnam War, and that's how important the vote is to me. I voted absentee for the mayor. I was living in Cleveland with my parents at that particular time. Mike White, I interviewed. I've known Mike ever since we were in the same Boy Scout troop, Troop 392 at Corey United Methodist Church on East 105th Street in Cleveland, Ohio. So I've interviewed them, and there's a direct relationship between Carl Stokes and Mike White. There's a direct relationship with African Americans, blacks, gaining political power. There is a direct link from Carl Stokes to Barack Obama. Without Carl Stokes, there is no Barack Obama, not as president. And Louis Stokes would tell you that Carl's brother, who was part of the campaign, who later became a congressman himself, Louis Stokes. And when Carl won the election as mayor of Cleveland, Cleveland was 2/3 white, and he won the election. And I thought he did a pretty good job. He got caught up in a couple of things, a couple of scandals, as it happens in politics. But there's a direct relationship. The night that Barack Obama was elected, that election night, Louis Stokes, the former congressman, after 30 years, is seated with me at the anchor desk at Channel 5. And we are just watching the network news. And we see that they've just announced that projections that Barack Hussein Obama has just been elected president of the United States. One of the reporters at Channel 5 saw it coming and had his still camera, and he walked around behind us. And the moment that it said, the ABC announced that Barack Obama has won, he snapped the photograph of Louis Stokes and me. And there's a tear in Louis Stokes' eye, because there's a direct link from his brother, Carl, to Barack Obama. A direct link of political power. That's how the world has changed. And if you're as old as I am, or getting close, you have seen so much change going going on, and that's one of the political stories. So whenever I see Carl, photographs of Carl, who later became a judge and an ambassador under the Clinton administration, and the judge after that here in Cleveland, up in Cleveland, I think about that.
You served in Vietnam.
I did.
And you're a decorated veteran, and we thank you for your service. Please. So, the Gulf War, 1990, started as Operation Desert Shield, then Desert Storm, then actually the war in the Gulf. You had never really covered a war per se, because Vietnam was coming to an end as you were aspiring to be an anchor.
Right, I was in a war. I didn't cover that.
War, you didn't cover
I was ducking bullets myself, you know.
How did your experience of serving affect your ability to cover the war as a journalist?
When I was embedded with a Coast Guard unit out of Cleveland, Port Security Unit 302, I was embedded with them. That means I was assigned to them. I traveled with them when they went overseas to the Persian Gulf. I went with them. They looked upon me as one of the guys who'd been to war, and they were asking me, what will I feel, Leon? Well, what am I going to feel? These are all Northeast Ohioans I'm talking about. These are all young men and women from Northeast Ohio. They wanted to know what they were going to feel once they got in a war. And so that experience, I think my experience helped calm them. And I only stayed over there a week. When I came home, I was in contact with some of their family members. They asked me to make phone calls to their family members and let them know where they were and that they were doing okay. And so I did that. So I know the importance of family during a wartime, because Marguerite and I got married just before I shipped out to Vietnam. We got married and I was in military uniform. We'd graduated from college together. And then I shipped out to Vietnam. And the first 2 years of our marriage, we were together only maybe 2.5 months, but not total, straight a week here, a month here, that kind of thing. So we went through that. So I know the role that families play, especially spouses, they pay when the other spouse is in a war. So I helped the guys try to understand that. And then my job was to cover whatever they were doing. And we did that.
Now that experience continued with your work with mental health with military personnel after their service. So 10 years apart, there were 2 suicide prevention stories where you took an active role in saving lives twice. How did that happen?
Jay, I'll tell you, because it was known and still is known that I'm a Vietnam veteran, I get phone calls from veterans. I get phone calls from people asking questions, or they just want to talk. And 2 different times, 10 years apart, 2 separate incidents, not connected, I got phone calls from one man. And in fact, when I went to the television station, they said, there's somebody who's been calling all day long, waiting on you to come in. I said, well, okay. But he won't leave a message, but he keeps asking for you. It's the same voice. I said, okay, well, maybe you'll call back. Well, when I'm there, he calls. And he tells me that he is a Vietnam veteran. He's contemplating suicide. And that he has been running back and forth between the Terminal Tower, tall building in downtown Cleveland, where there's a payphone. This is before cell phones. He's running back and forth between there and the bridge over the Cuyahoga River. He's going to jump in. Leon, give me a reason to live. Now, this is a cold call. This is right out of right. I'm on the phone. So, first thing I do is, what do I say? First thing I say is, brother, I love you. That's first thing. I love you. Now, where were you in Vietnam? And he tells me where he was. And I tell him where I was. So now we're talking about that. I says, well, I know what you're talking about. We've gone through a lot of the same kinds of things. So while I'm doing that, I'm getting somebody else on the desk next to me call suicide prevention. I got him on the phone. He's at the Terminal Tower phone bank in downtown Cleveland, middle of the day, and suicide prevention gets to him, and they get on the phone and says, Leon, we got him. We'll take care of him. And they take him off to the to the hospital. Well, about 2 weeks later, his family calls me and says, thank you so much. You saved his life. He's okay. We think he's going to be okay. 10 years later, I get another call. Like that, another veteran who knows I'm a veteran, and he says the same thing, except he says, I've got a gun to my head. I want you to give me a reason to live, Leon. Give me a reason, because you know. And I said, oh my God, Lord, don't let me misspeak. And I said, brother, I love you. I love you though. We all love you, and we're going to get you some help. And while he and I are talking, other people burst into the room. I can hear the commotion. I guess it's family members, and they wrestle the gun out of his hand. I can hear this on the phone, and they get him out. And a couple of weeks later, they call me and they say, he's okay. Thank you for listening to him, Leon. So, because I did stories on Vietnam, and usually when I do a story on Vietnam, it's usually mentioned that I'm a veteran of the war in Vietnam. And even promos were done, commercials were done about me being a Vietnam veteran with the television stations, both of them that I worked at in Cleveland. And people call. And so I realize that television reaches a lot of families, Jay. It reaches people who are depressed, that hurt, and sometimes they tell us, you're the only family I got. And I've had, in Columbus, I had a woman call me, and she knew all about Marguerite. They listen to everything you say on the air over the years. And I hear, you just had a little baby girl born. She knew that. She knew all about, but she says, you're the only family I got. And I look for you guys at 11 o'clock at night, every night. So I realize that this job of mine touches a lot of different lives and a lot of different hearts. So somebody told me earlier today that when I'm on the air, they say, you always seem calm, and you always seem like you've got it together, and you always seem like you're a guest in my house. And I do. I look at it that way. I am a guest in your house, Jay. I am a guest there. You've invited me in. Wherever your television is, you've invited me in. I used to have one minister down in Columbus say, my wife and I watch you between our toes. He said, because they watch the 11 o'clock news in bed. So wherever the television is, that's where we are.
That's where you are. Absolutely. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame comes to Cleveland, Ohio, amidst a lot of controversy.
Oh,
a lot of folks in New York City thought it should be there, but we got it.
We got it.
I was there when I M. Pei cut the ribbon, broke ground.
Yeah.
Then we did the opening.
Yeah.
What is the significance of a Hall of Fame and museum of that magnitude to a city at the time which was struggling to find its stride again?
Find our stride again. Cleveland is the home of rock and roll because of the great disc jockey Alan Freed. He didn't coin the term rock and roll. Rock and roll was an old term used in what was called race music or black music or rhythm and blues music. We're rocking and rolling all night long. It was a sexual term, is what it was, and but it was put in records. But he popularized that term for wider and whiter audiences on the radio, Alan Freed. So Cleveland plays, as a Cleveland radio disc jockey, so Cleveland plays a key role, Jay, in rock and roll, and why it is appropriate that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame be located right here at the shores of Lake Erie and East 9th Street, right next to Cleveland Brown Stadium. I like the idea that Cleveland is a music city. On one end of town, you got the world-renowned Cleveland Orchestra. And on the other end of town, you got the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We got it all covered. So I like to think of us as like Memphis and New Orleans see themselves as blues and jazz music. We are linked to rock and roll. And if you've never been there, if you grew up any time in the last 100 years or so and listened to rock and roll, your rock and roll, I'm Motown. My wife and I are mostly Motown. It's in there. If you like hip hop, that's in there. And if you like whatever else they're doing now, whatever, I don't keep up with it that much now, whatever else they're doing, it's in there. And but I was around when Elvis came on the scene. I didn't tell you this. Elvis came on the scene, and you'd know better than I, 1950 something.
Yeah, it was like 55.
Yeah,
56.
mid-50s. Yeah. And he was shaking it up a little bit. And my dad said, he ain't going to be around long. He'll be gone by October.
Oh, goodness.
Dad lived long enough to see Elvis become what Elvis did become.
When I was growing up, we had 3, 5, and 8. 3 was NBC, 5 was ABC, 8 was CBS,
Right.
and then we had some independents. Along comes a network, well, maybe it'll come, we don't know, cantankerous, but along comes a network called Fox. Talk about the impact of, there it is, talk about the impact of a 4th network and how it changed the landscape of Cleveland television, because CBS suddenly went from VHF to UHF.
Yeah. CBS went to Channel 19. And when I look at Channel 8, in the back of my mind, I still see CBS. It was part of what was called the Tiffany Network. But it changed, and television has changed so much in not only in Cleveland, but all around the country. Television has changed so much. It is so much a business now. I mean, it was always a business, but it's got to make money, and if it doesn't make money, then the show can get canceled very, very, very quickly. I miss the way things were when I came in, but I also have to change with the times, and change has come to television. It's just different now, and it's computer driven. It's digital. I'm covering stories for the television side, and after I get that story written and edited, somebody says, "Will you write something for the website?" Now you got to write it all over again for somebody to read on the website. It has changed a great deal, and I think that came in as Channel 8 was losing its ties to CBS, and 19 was coming in.
Do you remember when Virgil Dominic publicly said, "We will never be Fox 8"?
I remember that. Virgil is still around, by the way.
God bless. He got his start at KYC, right?
He did.
Yeah.
When I was a little boy, he was anchoring the news. Virgil Dominic. In fact, when I was working at the Plain Dealer, I was a newspaper reporter before I got into television. This would be right after college in the late 60s. When I was a newspaper reporter, I would ride the rapid transit towards Shaker Heights. I was living in Shaker, but living in Cleveland near the Shaker border. And Virgil Dominic would be riding the rapid transit, that midnight rapid that Al Roker and I would ride 10 years or 12 years later. Virgil Dominic would be sitting up by the driver, up close to the driver on the midnight rapid. He was the anchor man at Channel 3, later became the general manager and news director at Channel 8. And I remember when I got off the train, I said, "Hi, Mr. Dominic," like that, "Hi, Mr. Dominic."
Hi, Mr. Bibb.
And he says, yeah, like you did. And he says, "Hello, son. How are you? Have a good night." I said, "Yes, sir. You too." And I tell Virgil that all the time when I run into him. But he's doing quite well. Last I saw.
How many of you remember 1995? Okay, let's go back in time. I'm in bed with my wife. My daughter, very young, newborn. The phone rings at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's my mother. The first thing I say is, "Who died?" She said, "Funny you should say that. Your father just got a phone call from the captain of the 3rd precinct." I said, "What's going on?" She said, "There's a convoy of trucks leaving Cleveland Municipal Stadium. Art Modell moved our Browns to Baltimore. What was because I remember how I felt. What was the attitude in the newsroom about that?
It was disbelief. It was absolute disbelief. Now, we've got to cover that the Browns have pulled out in the middle of the night.
3 o'clock in the morning on 90 going east.
And moved to Baltimore. We got to cover that, but I mean, there are people, and some people were in tears. I mean, really. I remember that I did the first television interview with Art Modell, who owned the Browns, when he moved them to Baltimore. And I was doing a show called The Weekend Exchange on Channel 5, 1995, hour and a half on Saturday, hour and a half on Sunday. And we called him on the phone, got him on the phone, and I thought for certain that I would not be able to get through to Art Modell. But I called on the phone, we got his phone number from somewhere, and he answered the phone around, it must have been 7:30 in the morning, something like that. And I was surprised that he answered it. I thought somebody else might answer it, but he answered it with all the controversy going on. And I says, Mr. Modell, yes, this is Leon Bibb from Channel 5. Oh, Leon, yes, how are you? I says, I'm okay. Then tell me about what's going on. And he tells me why he moved the team. And I said, a lot of people are saying, Art, how could you move our team like that? And he said, Leon, that's where you got it wrong. It's not your team. It's my team.
I think we need to put the air conditioning.
So that was it. And then they were gone. And then they were gone.
And then they won the Super Bowl.
Yeah, then they won the Super Bowl.
Our team won the Super Bowl.
And so for those 4 years, and then Mike White gets on a plan. We got to get this team back. And so I remember I bought a Cleveland Browns, and I still have it, jacket. It's kind of a very nice vinyl jacket, quilted and heavy weather hood and all of that, zippered up front. And I bought this Cleveland Browns jacket because it was on sale, like it's 70% off at Sears at Randall Park Mall. So I saw the jacket, but then I ran into Mike White, the mayor. I says, I want the jacket, but if we're not going to get a team, and Mike says, Leon, get the jacket. I said, Mike, don't tell me that now. Now, Mike and I go back to Boy Scouts in the same neighborhood. We know each other. I says, Mike, don't tell me that. Leon, I guarantee we're going to get a team, and we're going to have a new stadium. Go buy the jacket. So I bought the jacket, and the team was so bad, 4 years later, 1999, the team was so bad, I never wore the jacket. And so the jacket hung in the closet with the tags, the price tag, 70% off, all that. Until I think maybe a year ago or 2 years ago, when they started looking fairly good, and I said, I'll make a story out of this jacket. Now, this is how you can make a story out of anything. I said, I'll do a story that I have got this jacket, which I've had for 20 years almost, whatever it was, 18 years, and I'm going to wear the jacket for the very first time, because the team has started to win. This is before we started to lose again. So I bought it, and I on television, in front of the Brown Stadium, I cut the tags off, and I slipped the jacket on and said something like, Go Browns. But I'd done some interviews that went with the story. But that was tough times when they left. And for that 4-year period, I did not watch television. Well, I watched television, but I didn't watch football. I might have seen maybe 2 or 3 quarters of television regarding any football other than college football. I didn't watch.
It was just too painful.
It was too painful. And people said, well, I had new people say, well, I'm a Baltimore a Ravens fan because that's the Cleveland Browns. I said, no, I can't do that. And so on Marguerite will tell you, on Sundays, I just started taking walks. And I found I picked up about 4 extra hours on my Sunday because I wasn't watching anybody's football team.
Y2K. Much ado about nothing. Do you remember all of the hoopla, everything we had to do? We had batteries and candles and this and that and stocked the shelves. And then it turned and nothing happened.
Yeah, we probably bought water and had water because when the new, for you younger folks, when the new century came in, would computers be able to read 00 as opposed to 99? Well, what is the year? 99, 97, 96, 55, whatever it was. Will it be able to read 00? And we thought the electricity might go off with the energy companies. The water company might not be able to pump water, all that kind of stuff. And it came, and everything still worked, just like the lights were still on.
It was as anticlimactic as Geraldo Rivera breaking into Al Capone's vault and finding nothing.
And finding nothing. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. Nothing happened.
All right, this next story may be tough for us to watch, but we're going to get through it together.
It's around 8:45 a.m., a chilled morning in New York City, partly cloudy. In Boston, American Airlines Flight 11, bound for Los Angeles, has been hijacked. Then a news bulletin. An airplane flying due south has crashed into the upper level of the North Tower of the World Trade Centers, 9:03 a.m. A surreal event unlike anything in the history of the broadcast media. Countless viewers are watching live when suddenly an airplane is seen flying in an easterly direction.
Thanks.
The plane swings around the southern end of the second World Trade Tower and explodes on impact. 9:30 a.m. President Bush at an elementary school in Sarasota, Florida, goes on television live to announce the disaster.
Terrorism against our nation will not stand.
But even the president doesn't know just what is coming next. At 9:35 a.m., a third hijacked plane crashes into the Pentagon. There is no question now that the United States is under attack by terrorists. In Washington, the Pentagon, the Capitol, and the White House, as well as other government buildings, are evacuated. And Manhattan Island, incredibly, is sealed off. All bridges and tunnels are closed. And then, 9:59 a.m., a scene that will change New York for all time. The South Tower of the World Trade Center collapses. And just a half hour later, at 10:28, the North Tower goes down as well. New York's Twin Towers have disappeared. It has been less than 2 hours since the first attack in New York City. An unimaginable number of people are dead and injured. The southern end of New York City's famous skyline has vanished. Nothing will ever be the same again. In a street-side news conference near the terrible devastation of the World Trade Centers, New York City Mayor Rudolph Giuliani said, "I have a sense it's a horrendous number of lives lost. I don't know yet. Right now, we have to focus on saving as many lives as possible."
Were you at the station or were you at home? Because it was in the morning.
I was at home, in the kitchen.
And I was at WCAK.
On radio.
2510 St. Clair Avenue.
Mm-hmm. I was at home, and we were watching it unfold on the Today Show and everywhere else, I guess, all the networks, because the two planes, first time I heard the plane flew into the World Trade Center, I thought it was an accidental thing, because in World War II, during World War II, there was a military plane caught in a fog somewhere or another and flew into the Empire State Building. It was an accident. I thought it might have been that, and then I realized it was not that at all. And then when I was on my way to work early because of the gravity of the news, and Marguerite mentions something that it's falling down, and when we saw the World Trade Center go down like pancakes, I thought it was an atomic bomb. I thought it was like a mushroom cloud. I thought it was a dirty bomb. Nobody knew what had happened. So we went in. I went into work that day, and it took a long time for us to get on the air. The networks had it. I mean, there was no room for the locals to do anything, but we were still preparing. Cleveland played a role in this because
you were at 5 then, right?
I was at Channel 5.
Yeah.
1995. Yeah, at Channel 5 in 2000.
Which would have had
yeah.
you just out of the evacuation area of downtown, because the first 30 blocks of downtown Cleveland were evacuated immediately.
Right.
You were at 30th and Euclid.
East 30th and Euclid at Channel 5. And I remember that there was a plane, a mysterious plane landed. They were getting planes down. Wherever an airliner was, just land, just get down, get out of the sky. And I remember it was the bluest sky I've ever seen. And whenever I see that kind of blue sky, I think of 9/11. But it was a mysterious plane we dispatched reporters and photographers out to Hopkins Airport because this plane landed and there was something strange about it. And the police were out there and other agents. They were running security dogs up and down the staircase of this airplane, checking this airplane, but it was okay. Here's a little known story. I've covered this story twice on anniversaries of 9/11. When United Airlines Flight 93 was hijacked and commandeered to crash in that meadow in Pennsylvania. That hijacking took place over Cleveland. And there are two Catholic nuns at a place called Our Lady of Lourdes Shrine, right on the Cleveland-Euclid border. They were walking in the garden, and they saw this airliner low. They said it was so low they could read the numbers on it, and they saw it just jerked around. It just made a quick turn, 180-degree turn, and flew back the other direction. Flew to the east, flew toward Pennsylvania. I've interviewed these two nuns over the years.
That was Flight 93.
That was Flight 93, which was later crashed into the meadow in Pennsylvania, and the hijackers were intent on crashing it into either the White House or the Capitol building. And the passengers on board, wrestled the plane, control from them as best they could, and just crashed it and took their own lives with it to keep it from going to. By now they're getting cell phones, or they're getting some sort of communications. They know something has happened down below in New York City and at the Pentagon. Our daughter Allison is at the time living in Washington, D.C. She was living near the White House, and she was working near the White House and living near the Pentagon. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, that following morning, she called crying. She says, "Daddy, I can't sleep." I says, "Allison, nobody is sleeping. The whole world is awake tonight." I remember that was my line. But that was a sea change for us. That was like another Pearl Harbor, 1941. That was a change, and all of us old enough will remember where we were on 9/11.
How long did it take to get back to regular local news? Was it days, weeks, or months?
I think it took a few weeks, I think, before we got back to regular. But we were all still touching on it because they were still digging and finding bodies and reporting on what was going on in New York and in the Pentagon. Years later, on the 15th anniversary, I was at the Pentagon, and we did an hour-long special remembering the Pentagon, remembering Ground Zero in New York City, the World Trade Center, and remembering the crash of United Airlines 93 in the Meadow. Lee Jordan was in Pennsylvania, Danita Harris was at Ground Zero in New York, and I was at the Pentagon, and we went live with a special hour-long special on remembering 9/11.
We're going to switch gears for a minute. We have some pioneers in the audience tonight. Marianne Cooper, the founder of Richland Academy of the Arts. Deanna West Torrance, North End Community Improvement Collaboration. Jane Campbell, the first female mayor of Cleveland. Talk about Jane and how significant that election was.
Well, she
Cleveland was a boys' town.
Yeah. She followed Mike White as mayor. Jane lived in Cleveland, right on the Shaker Heights border, and not a couple of houses inside Cleveland, from Shaker. I don't think her administration really got off the ground well. I don't think it got off the ground well, but I think that she made some inroads in becoming a first female mayor of the city, and I thought that she was a nice woman, and still is a nice woman. I haven't seen her in a while, but I thought she was trying very hard, but Cleveland was beset with so many problems, as so many cities are beset with so many problems. I don't know how any mayor deals with it, including the current mayor, who, by the way, is a cousin of mine. Mayor, I get asked that all the time. Justin Bibb, is he your nephew or son? I said, oh, he's a first cousin. He's a first cousin. So I think she tried hard, but it just didn't catch fire, and maybe it wasn't time yet.
The next story is an interesting story because most people don't talk about blackouts, but we're going to take a look at this.
Looking north towards the lake.
Oh man, it's terrible. My wife's sick, and I can't no air, and that's the worst part. The food and the air.
As you remember the blackout of 2003, it was different than any other time we lost power in Northeast Ohio. It frightened the entire town. Were you able to broadcast?
I think we had emergency power, and that was the one where the power was out all around Lake Erie and the Great Lakes area, even parts of Ontario were out. Yeah, we were able to get on the air because of all the television stations in recent years have gotten generators that come on. They power up enough for your essentials, but it's not. You can't have the same kind of power throughout the building that we normally would. And we could get on the air with that, so we went with it. But a lot of people couldn't see what we were doing because they didn't have any power to look at television, unless it was battery powered in those days. So it was a difficult one. My mother grew up on a farm. Both my parents grew up on farms, and they were Depression children. And my mother has a saying: you don't miss your water till your well runs dry. And we had a power outage the other day. I mean, how long we were without power? About 24 hours, 28 hours, something like that. And it's surprising how much you rely on it. I mean, you go in a room and you hit the switch, but nothing happens. You're just so used to hitting that switch. And the people across the street were without power for 84 hours because of the storms that had come through. It really kind of humbles you. How much we rely on electricity just to do everything.
In 2008, how many of you remember the Andy Griffith Show? Gomer Pyle. Remember the episode where he ran around screaming "Citizens arrest" at everybody? Well, Leon did that. Except this time somebody surrendered to you. What happened?
There was a man living in Shaker Heights. He's a lawyer, and he was jogging for exercise. It was twilight. It was twilight time, and it was getting almost dark, but not quite dark. and a bunch of young males jumped him and beat him and tried to rob him. But he didn't have any money, and they were complaining, "You don't have any money?" He said, "Well, I'm jogging, and I don't carry my wallet when I'm out jogging." Well, they beat him pretty severely, and they broke his leg. I think his femur, thigh bone, I believe, but I know one of the bones in his leg was broken. He was roughed up pretty bad. Well, this happened in Shaker, right near the Cleveland line. Police picked up some youth, young men and boys, not far away, and for some reason they let them go. They didn't think they were involved, but they were questioning everybody about this severe beating. Then they realized that those were the people they needed to arrest. So there's an all points bulletin out for them, and among them is a 16-year-old boy, and they're looking for him by name. So we're broadcasting. Police are looking for this individual who goes by this name and lives at this. And this goes on for several days. Then while I'm preparing the 11 o'clock news at Channel 5, a security guard comes in and says, "Leon, there's some people who want to see you at the back gate to the television station." And I says, "Who are they?" He said, "Well, they wouldn't say who they are, but they want to see you. They're insistent on seeing you." So I go to the back gate. There's a little bit of a drizzle coming in down from the sky. And I go to the back gate, and they say, "Mr. Bibb, in the back seat is the boy that did that beating of that man. He's one of the kids, and we want to surrender to you." I said, "Well, this is a police thing." And I said, "But I can't just say, well, go to the police station." I mean, they've come to me, and so I let them in the gate. And we talk in the rain, standing outside, and they're telling me the story. And I'm saying, well, why don't the three of us go into the television station and let's sit down in the little cafeteria area we have there where vending machines and coffee can be purchased. It's the father and the uncle and the 16-year-old fugitive that police are looking for. And the father does all the talk. The 16-year-old doesn't say anything. He just doesn't want to be there, obviously. And the father says, "We don't want him to get roughed up by the police, because we think that he would get roughed up by the Shaker police. Crime took place in Shaker. Or he would get roughed up by the Cleveland police, who are also looking for him, and we're in Cleveland right now." So I said, "Well, okay, we are surrendering to you." So I take the young fella in, and we sit down, and I don't have any handcuffs.
I was just going to ask you.
I don't have that in my desk. I've got no weapon. I have no gun. None of that. No baton. No. And I says, "Well, you want a coffee and a sandwich?" So I fit the bill. I cover that. I give the young kid a coffee and a sandwich. And then I get on the phone. I call the photographer, one of the photographers' room in our Channel 5. And Reggie Young's my photographer that night. I said, "Reggie, bring your camera on in here. I got the kid." So Reggie comes in with the camera. Then the kid says, "I don't want to be on television." I said, "Well, then you should not surrender to a television station, because this is all that I do." And then I said, "Well, I got to call the cops." And father and uncle said, "Yeah, you got to call." So I called the Shaker cops, and because the crime took place in Shaker, and Shaker says, "Yeah, okay, we'll call Cleveland because he's in Cleveland now." I said, "Okay," so I called the Cleveland cops, and then they come and they arrest him and take him, put him in the back seat, but we got the camera rolling the whole time. So he goes off to juvenile jail, I guess, and the father thanks me, and we shake hands, and they leave in their car. And I've made citizen's arrest, I don't think are legal in the state of Ohio, but that is the upshot of what happened. Of course, I got to cover the trial now. When he does go,
it's a News Channel 5 exclusive.
It's a News Channel 5 exclusive. And I go to the juvenile court, and there is the young man. He's sitting there. "Hi, Mr. Bibb, you remember me?" I said, "Yeah, I remember you, son." And I covered the case, and he was, I think he was given some years in juvenile. I think he went to juvenile court. I don't know if he was pushed over to adult court, but the adults who were with him, they went to court as well, and they went to jail. And the attorney who was roughed up. He was an attorney. He was there as a witness of saying, "Yeah, this is the one who did it. He did it, and you hit me, and you hit me, and you hit me in the face, and you hit me with the stick." And he did that. We covered all of that. So.
Well, we are rounding third and heading home. We got a couple more stories to share before we turn it over to questions. So, you talked about the connection between Carl Stokes and Barack Obama. Normally, interviews with heads of state are done by national journalists. So like Lester Holt or Dan Rather or somebody like that. But you were called to the White House. Let's remember this.
Hello, everybody. I'm Leon Bibb, News Channel 5. Thanks for checking us out online. We're standing right outside the White House in Washington, D.C., because tomorrow morning, Monday morning, I'm going to be inside the White House for a one-on-one interview with the President of the United States, Barack Obama. We're scheduled to talk about the economy. Certainly, we're going to talk about the automobile industry and the impact it has on Northeast Ohio. So stay tuned on News Channel 5 and on Newsnet5.com. We'll let you know how it goes with the President. I'm Leon Bibb at the White House.
Leon Bibb at the White House. You had to go through security, and go through all those clearances. When you got through that, what was the first thing that went through your mind?
Well, before all of this, I get a phone call from the White House. Says, "Would you like to interview President Obama?" He's running for re-election, and we've got the economy and the bailout of the banks and the bailout of the automobile industry. All that's going on. And they said, "We know you in Cleveland. You are a highly regarded journalist, and we can, if you want to, you can interview Obama in the White House, and we will make it exclusive to the state of Ohio that day. Nobody from Ohio will talk to him that day. No reporter, at least." So we jump at the station, jumps at that, and I give my social security number. And a couple of days later, 3 days later or so, my producer and photographer and I are on our way to Washington, D.C. So we go into the White House. They check us in. They take us to the inside the West Wing, right around the corner from the White House, from the Oval Office, next door to the Oval Office. And the president's chief of staff, Bill Daley, at that time, is there, and he wants to talk to me about this. You can ask him anything you want, says Bill Daley, but this is what he wants to talk about. So, the economy and all of that. And so we take notes on that. And then they march us over to the room where we're going to do this inside the White House complex. It's really in the executive office building, which is attached to the White House, right next to the West Wing. So East Wing, so West Wing. So we go over there and we set up our stuff in this room. It's all lit for us, and I'm in this little anteroom outside the room where we're going to do the interview. But there's a crack in the door. I mean, the door's open that much, and in walks Barack Obama. Sits down. In walks a woman in a red sweater. She says nothing but "Hi, Mr. President," or whatever. Apparently they know each other. And she goes in her bag and she pulls out television makeup. And she starts patting him down. And I says, "Well, hell, I didn't know he was going to do the TV makeup thing." So I went into my bag. and I powder up a little bit. I said, "I'm trying to look good too, Mr." So then we go in, and the president is seated, President Obama. He's seated, and he says, "Pardon me." He said, "You're Leon Bibb from Cleveland." I said, Mr. President, I am. It's good to see you." And we shake hands. He says, "Pardon me for not standing." He says, "But they told me to sit on my coat, sit on my jacket." And I said, "Mr. President, I understand that, because I'm in television, and men sit on their jackets, gives you a nice shoulder line." So we sat down, And the first thing he says before the cameras are rolling, he says, are you guys over LeBron going to Miami? Because LeBron was in Miami at that time. I said, Mr. President, we're struggling. I mean, we're struggling in Cleveland. He said, well, I think you're going to be okay, but LeBron is going to give the Miami Heat a championship. It's going to happen, and maybe he'll even come back one day. But not for a while. But he's down there, but I think you guys will be okay. So then we chatted, and we shook hands, and I got a photograph of all of that. And then we did the interview, and I did about 20 minutes with the president. And then at the end of it, he said, well, thank you for coming. He says, but I got to go. I got some things I got to do today. And I says, well, I figured that. Now, there's a backstory. There's a side story to this. That was the same time period my mother was in hospice care. We're anticipating mother's death any day now. And I told my sister, my mother was in Cleveland, I told my sister, maybe I shouldn't go. Maybe because I better be here in case mother goes. She says, Leon, you gotta go. You cannot say no to this. Mother would want you to go. Even if mother died today, you'd still have to go. So I decided to go. And mother survived, and that was on a Monday. I came back on Tuesday from Washington and told mother I was with the president. And she smiled. I could see the smile. But she was ill. She was dying. But she understood I was with the president. Well, I don't think she saw it on television. I don't think she had that kind of strength. But she understood where I was and what I was doing. And 4 days later, her mother was gone. But she died knowing that her son had just spent time with the president of the United States.
Not only was this probably the most important interview you did in your career, but it was also the first time you became the story. Here's Lee Jordan.
It has been an exciting day for News Channel 5's Leon Bibb. Leon had the rare opportunity to travel to Washington, D.C. for an exclusive sit-down interview with President Obama. They discussed a variety of issues, including the auto industry and the economy. Leon has more from the White House.
We talked about the 54,000 jobs added in the month of May, down significantly from previous months. And the president talked about the 9.1% unemployment rate nationwide.
We've got some headwinds going up against us, but the overall trend is an economy that is still growing, jobs that are still being added, and what we need to do now is to make sure that we get back to the fundamentals.
Mr. President, last week you visited an Ohio plant celebrating the government bailout of Chrysler and General Motors. You told the workers there, I place my bets on you. The Ohio workers and those throughout the United States are placing their bets on you for economic recovery. How do you feel with them placing their bets on you? How do you respond to that?
Well, look, when it comes to the auto industry, I feel very good about what's happened. We not only helped them out, but we also said, you've got to restructure. You've got to rethink how you're doing business.
With the end of the space shuttle's flights coming up, the president also talked about the future of NASA Glenn Research Center in Cleveland.
So the key, even though the space shuttle is phasing out, is what's that next big leap? And that's going to require research. The research facility of NASA is going to continue to be critical because we want to find what are those next technological leaps that will take us not just to the moon, but take us to Mars and beyond.
With the death of Osama bin Laden, I asked the president about the possibility of troop pullouts from Afghanistan. The president said this would be a period of transition this summer. He said he would make an announcement on that later. Leon Bibb, News Channel 5, the White House.
And tonight, Republicans are responding to President Obama's comments. The chairman of the Republican National Committee released this statement: everyone wants Chrysler and other American car companies to succeed. I drive American cars myself. But the fact is you can't buy a car if you don't have a job. Instead of continuing to take victory laps on government spending more money, it's time for Barack Obama to take a real look at his economic policies that have failed to create jobs and are putting our economy on a road to bankruptcy.
Was that the biggest interview of your career?
I guess so. It was a significant one, certainly one of the ones that I anticipated. There was a bit of nervousness on my part to be one-on-one with the president, even albeit for 20 minutes. But I would say, yeah, it was memorable, very, very memorable. And, I had family members who, when I came home, we went to a family reunion and we talked about that. And they saw video of some of that. And everybody wanted to shake the hand that shook the hand of President Obama and my family. So it was good. But it's still listed. If you go back to the president's itinerary for that day in June of 2011, you go back to that day, you'll see what he was doing at that particular hour, and it says interviewed by WWS newsman Leon Bibb.
Two more stories, this one quick. Is 4 terms too much?
For president?
For anything. Here's Frank Jackson, 4 terms as mayor. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, 4 terms as the United States president. Is it too much?
It's a hard one. I don't think it's too much for a mayor, maybe too much for a president. Maybe too much for a president, although Franklin Delano Roosevelt did it, but those were different times.
Do you think if Frank Jackson had been allowed to run for a 5th term and decided to run, would he have been reelected again?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. I think so.
We got to leave this presentation on a high note.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the most exciting thing that's ever happened in my lifetime. Let's remember the Cleveland Cavaliers.
In 52 years, we will have a parade for a championship team tomorrow here in Cleveland. We will all remember where we were when that clock touched 0 on Sunday night. Photographer Andy Sugden and producer Randy Zemnick share the moment with you one more time.
Cavalier team were looking to make history in the playoffs and finally end that long title drought.
And you remember you watched the game at the baseball stadium.
Yeah. Back to Iguodala, up for the layup. Oh, blocked by James. James with the rejection. Oh my goodness. Irving and Curry, one-on-one. Irving puts it up. It's good. And the Cavaliers by 3. Iguodala to inbound. Trying to save it, Curry catches. One dribble, steps back, puts up a 3. Won't go. Rebound tip taken by Space. Final seconds. It's over. It's over. Cleveland is a city of champions once again. The Cavaliers are NBA champions. 52 years. Time to celebrate a title.
Did you burst into tears like I did? I hugged my youngest daughter tight.
I think we did. I started driving to the station about halftime because I was off that evening. But I started driving to the television station at halftime. I said they're going to need me on the air. They're going to need my comments. They're going to need all of us. We're going to be on till 4 o'clock in the morning probably if we win this thing. And I watched the last part of it, listened on the radio, of course, and watched the last part of it at the television station. And we went on the air, and I was not anchoring that 11 o'clock, but I was commentator on the wings, on the side there. And I coined a phrase. The phrase came to me out of nowhere. It came to me out of nowhere. And maybe I'll get Alzheimer's one day. God forbid. I do not. But I think I will remember this phrase. It was about us ending the long drought of having no championship in baseball, basketball, football, or whatever. And I said, the drought has ended. And in Cleveland, we don't end the drought with water. We end it with champagne.
That is a profound ending. 50 plus years, still on the air today at Channel 3, at Channel 5, at Channel 4, at Channel 11 on the Plain Dealer. Ohio's greatest storyteller, Leon Bibb, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Now, we promised the audience that if they had questions for you, they could ask them. Does anybody, Mr. Emery, hold on, I'll pass the microphone, but here's your job. When you're done, you pass it to the next person.
Thank you. Leon, it's been 40 years since you've been sitting in our living rooms. Thank you. As a trusted newscaster and a friend, more so than anything. Cleveland news is kind of unique because you mentioned Virgil Dominic. There's Tim Taylor. There's Dorothy Fulltime. There's really iconic names in local news. What makes Cleveland news market unique?
It's a good market, although it's dropped in size. When I came to Channel 3 back in 79, 1980, we were the 9th or 10th largest market. We're now 17 because the Houstons and the Phoenixes of the world have risen and the Sun Belt cities have grown, and places like Cleveland and Detroit and a few others have dropped in size. But it is still a good news town. We used to have a bureau, an NBC bureau, which was headquartered in Pittsburgh to cover this part of the country. And the guys spent more time in Cleveland covering news than they spent in Pittsburgh, because they said, Cleveland does what we do. It's a fist fight town. Everything is done the hard way. And it's a gutsy town. I like to say we don't eat quiche and drink wine. We eat pizza and drink beer.
Amen.
It's that kind. It's a working man's town. And although it's changing, with a lot of medicine and all that. But I grew up with uncles and working at the steel mills and the automobile plants. This whole part of the country was that. So I think it's that kind of town that keeps people in. And one of the things I tell young reporters when they come in, and they're coming in all the time, I said, if you want to make a name, spend at least 10 years here. You got to do 10 years before you even get known. You got to do 10 years to get known. That's if you're any good. And then you got to stay, and then you have to be involved in the community. And the people that you mentioned, those people, those names. And by the way, I went to college with Wilma Smith from Channel 5. She and I were at Bowling Green when Marguerite and I were at Bowling Green at the same time. Get involved in the community. I'm involved in the community. I do things like this all the time. I'm involved in the community on the board of directors for the for the Salvation Army and some other organizations like that. But I speak in schools, all of that, because I know if I speak in a school, those kids will remember. I have people coming up to me now saying, you spoke to my 6th grade class, and I just want you to know, I remember what you said, and they will quote the speech, and they're like 30-something years old now. And so I think that's all part of it, Mr. Emery. I think that's all part of it. That's what keeps a lot of us here. And we make a fairly good living. I could have made a lot of money at the network. I could have made a lot more money at the network. But what do I have to give up for that? If I'm gone all the time, what am I going to tell her? What am I going to tell our daughters when they're growing up that daddy's always gone? So I made a decision to stay. So we're okay. And I tell her sometimes when I get weak, God, I could have made a lot of money. And she says, Leon, we don't spend the money we already have. And you want to make more? We have what we need. We have what we need.
Who's next? Any other questions for Mr. Bibb? Pass the microphone over to Eric and let him take us. Oh, we got one.
I'm just interested in...
Just give it to her.
Yeah, we got to be able to hear you, Sheila.
I'm just interested in a stalwart that you've been. Back when African Americans were not hired, and you obviously made a mark way back when. You were loved, you were respected, and here you are today, still in broadcasting. And so many have tried and they've not made it. And congratulations to you, the storyteller that you are. And you connected with people all along the way that places you where you are today. And so there was a reason for you to have survived all of this. And I think it's because of the depth of what you get into with people, the stories that you tell, and such a human side to it. So not really a question, but just like, well done. Well done, Leon.
Thank you. Thank you. I will tell you, it has not always been easy. I will tell you that now. The very first job I ever got, I was in college and I needed an internship, and they got me an internship with a company. And I had one more year of college to go from Bowling Green, and they got me an internship. And the internship came through. It was over the telephone. My professor got it for me. And when he said, I think you're going to like this young black fellow right out of Cleveland. And the job went away. And I was told, I'm sorry, but we don't hire black people. Simple as that. Now that could destroy people. To be 20 years old, there's no black professors, no black president, no black assistant president, no black faculty members at Bowling Green State University, only Marguerite and me, and about 123 other black students on campus. So I cried on her shoulder, I cried on my fraternity brother's shoulders, but I gutted out. You just dig down and you say, I will not let somebody turn me away from what I believe God wants me to do. And I have always taken that approach to be the very best that I can be, no matter where I'm placed. Quickly, I will tell you, I was not trying to get to Cleveland. I was in Columbus, and I was basically happy in Columbus, although we were barely making a good living at it. We were okay, but Cleveland called. I was not trying to get to Cleveland. Every job I've ever been offered has come to me in an unusual way. Cleveland called me from Columbus. Columbus called me from Toledo in a strange way. And if you want a spiritual story, I'll take you there in a spiritual way. In a minute, 1 minute, I picked up a hitchhiker in Toledo, Ohio, who got in the car. He didn't get in the car at first because I was driving a company car. And I passed him. And it was a cold day. I was driving a news car that was unmarked. It was just a green Ford. And something told me, go back and pick that kid up. It was a young man. Go back and pick that kid up. And I denied it, I denied it, I denied it, I denied it, but I kept driving for a mile. And finally I couldn't stand it anymore. And the voice said, go get him. I turned around, made a U-turn, went back and picked the kid up, took him out to the University of Toledo. And he was a student there. I'm at Toledo, WTOL television in Toledo. As soon as he got in the car, he saw the camera in the back seat. He looked at me. He said, aren't you the new reporter, the brand new reporter at Channel 11? I said, yes, I am. He said, my girlfriend's mother wondered, whatever happened to you? And I said, who's your girlfriend's mother? He says, she's the public affairs director for the NBC station in Columbus. Why don't you call her? Because she saw tape of you when you were in college. So I called her, and she says, funny you should call. There's a job open, and I want you to apply for it if you don't have a contract. I said, no, I don't have a contract. You just work here at Channel 11. You don't have a contract, you just work. So she says, don't call the news director for a half hour. I want to tell him about you. I called him a half hour later. He says, well, let's see if we can get you here for an interview. The day of the interview, which would have been 1 week later, it was 10 below zero across the whole state of Ohio. And of course, my little Volkswagen Bug had a dead battery. I called the news director and says, I got a dead battery. I got to get that fixed. It's 10 below zero all over the state. And he says, well, we can do it another day. I says, I can get there tonight. If you're going to be there, I can get there 6 hours later. I can take a Greyhound bus. He said, I'll see you when you get here. And I took the Greyhound bus that night. Car still in the parking lot at home, in the apartment we lived in, the basement apartment we lived in. And when I got there, the news director said, I'm going to tell you something, kid. I was a kid then. I'm going to tell you something, kid. You got character. It's not everybody who would take a Greyhound bus 100 and some miles in 10 below zero weather just for an interview. He said, I know you have character. Let's see if you can read on television. Let's see if you can write. And he put me through that, and he came down steps after we did the little audition. He says, I'll call you tomorrow. I came back to Toledo on the bus. That night, he called me, offered me a job, and he said, when can you start? And I said, can you give me 3 weeks? He said, can you give me 2 weeks, because I'm in a tight spot. So I said, I'll be there in 2 weeks. I walked in to be a reporter. He says, a funny thing happened on the way here. I need you to co-anchor the 11 o'clock Saturdays and Sunday nights. A hitchhiker. And I've preached this, when I do it in sermon, I preach this. And not that I'm a minister, but I've spoken in churches. I stretch it out, and I call that the story. Angel at the curbside. I never saw the hitchhiker again. I don't even remember his name. But his information was right on. And I think that when God wants something to happen, God makes it happen.
You were meant to be. You were meant to be.
Okay. Thank you.
Does anybody else have a question for Mr. Bibb before she will pass that microphone forward? Anybody else? Over there in the corner, next to Mrs. Bibb.
We've lived in Columbus and Toledo and now here, and I'm interested to hear any of your other interesting stories. As long as you can talk.
Oh, there's so many things that have taken place. You know, I guess when I retired from Channel 5, I think I did the math, and it was like 50 years or whatever it was at that particular time, times 52. I think it was 2,500 weeks of television straight through. You know, it's just been a wonderful career that is still going on, and my mind is still good, and I hope my voice is still good, and my writing ability is still there, and I love what I do, and it gives me an opportunity to go places and meet people like you. I'm okay with time. I got another story if you want it.
You have the floor, Mr. Bibb.
I mean, if they start leaving, I'll quit. You know. I can take a hint. It was in the early 80s. Woman calls Channel 3, where I began my Cleveland career. Hello, Mr. Bibb. I said, yes, you're my favorite reporter. I said, oh, well, thank you, I appreciate it. That's why I'm calling you, and I'm kind of whispering. I says, okay. She said, I got a story for you. I said, what is it? Well, I work at a convenience store. It was a Lawson's milk store. I don't know if you're early 80s. I work at the store here, and kids are coming in, and they're buying candy, and they're using $20 and $50 bills they say they found. And it's one kid after another. Summertime, kids, schools. I says, well, I'm on my way. So I get my photographer and sound man, who had a two-man crew in those days, and we drive over to the near west side of Cleveland. We go to the convenience store. And indeed, there are children in there with wads of money. Now, little kids, 10 years old, 11 years old, that kind of thing. So I said, where did you get the money? And they said, one little boy said, they're tearing a house down over there, and when the bulldozer hit the house, money flew out of the walls. I said, what street's it on? He said, I don't know the name of the street. I said, but you can take me there, can't you? And I did what you shouldn't do. Stranger danger. I said, hop in the car with me. And he says, I got my bicycle. I said, we'll take your bike too. So we put the kid and the bike in the news car with me and the photographer and the sound man. And we go to Ellen Avenue. Summertime. And usually when you show up at a story and lots of people in a lower income neighborhood, take my picture, take my picture, take my picture. Kids come out of the woodwork. Take my picture. Hey, cameraman, take. None of that. Because everybody is digging in the rubble of a 1/3 or 1/2 torn down old frame house. And they're finding money. I called the TV station from I had a two-way radio. We did not have cell phones in these days. I get on the two-way radio and I says, I'm going to go in somebody's house and borrow their phone and call you because I'm not going to say anything over the airwaves because Channel 8 and Channel 5, they monitor us like we monitor them. So I go in and I call. I said, I got this house. And I said, you need to block out some time for me, but we're not going to talk about this on through the two-way radio because this is our story. Nobody else in the world, journalist, is here but me, little Leon, and the house. And I start working on it. And I remember interviewing a middle-aged lady, and she had some money. She was just grinning. She had some money. And I said, how much money do you have? She says, I have about $1,500 that I found. And I said, well, where is it? And she says she takes her pant and rolls it over, and inside her underwear, right up here is the money. And she pulls this wet water money out, and we're photographing that money. And her holding it up to her, and I take it and I do my stand-up. I have to talk to the camera, and I'm holding up her money, and then I give her money back. And there's money all over. Well, the bottom line is they were tearing down the house in the old neighborhood. And the workers were going to the house with buckets, and they were picking up something and nonchalantly walking back to their cars, opening up the trunks of the cars, dumping it in, and going back nonchalantly for whatever it was. Till somebody said, they've got money. There's money in those buckets. Then the whole crowd runs in, and the workers who are tearing the house down, they skedaddle. They're gone. Well, we go on the air with this at 6 o'clock on a sunny day. Next thing you know, the competition, Channel 5 is there, Channel 8 is there, so the police are there, the FBI is there, and the Treasury Department is there because they got to see the money. Is this stolen money? Is this counterfeit money? And they run the numbers. I've got this story, but I'm so far ahead of the competition because a lot of people got money. When the cops showed up, they ran. So I went with the story, and the money was all legal. Interviewed the FBI and the Treasury Department. They said it is not stolen. The numbers on it, the serial numbers are all good. It's all good money. It's not counterfeit, and it's not stolen or anything like that. I said, is there anything you can do? And they said, no, we can't do anything because it's not our house and we don't have any control over that. So the people got that money. I was there at 11 o'clock. We went back live at 11 o'clock, and by then there were people from all over Northeast Ohio had gone to that Ellen Avenue. And I remember seeing a woman in a raspberry or a purple disco dress, a lot of glitter all over it. And she had on high heels, and she was in her hands and knees, and she had a kitchen fork, and she was digging. True story. And that next morning, I was on the Today Show, the NBC Today Show, with the story. Well, we did some research on that over the weeks later, and found out there had been some years before, decades before, a man who lived in it. He was a blue-collar worker. He saved everything he ever made, from what we're told from relatives and people who knew him. And he rarely spent anything, but he didn't trust banks. So he's hiding the money in the walls of the house. And then he died with the secret, apparently. And the house goes from middle income to lower income. Now it is a rental property, and people over the decades, the house moved in, people moved in, moved out, people moved in, moved out. It was a low income rental property in a dying neighborhood at that particular time. And all of the poor people who lived in that house, not realizing that there were hundreds of thousands of dollars just on the other side of their pillow where they lay their heads. That's the Ellen Avenue Money House. Thank you so much.
It was an honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'm going to turn it back over to Eric to tell us what's next for Gravity, Ohio.
So we invite you to come out. One, thank you all for coming this evening. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did with Leon's stories and just his wonderful personality. Thank you again. Round of applause. So we invite you this coming week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday is Rockin' Ribs for those who have been around as long as I have and longer. Historically, that was at NC State College. It's downtown here on the square. We have 4 rib vendors, other concession stands, vendors throughout the day, plenty of bands and music throughout the day as well, and that benefits NC State College's scholarship fund that they're getting back started again through Rockin' Ribs. So we invite you to come out to that. It's 4 to 10 on Thursday and 12 to 10 on Friday and Saturday. So we hope to see you there. And thank you all again for coming this evening. Have a good night.
One last thing before we say goodbye. On your tables, you will notice table tents for a $16 million campaign for the NECIC Community Center. Take it with you, scan the QR code, ask Deanna and Melissa how you can help. This woman's changing lives, and we're honored to have her with us tonight. Thank you.